What's one important lesson that you have learned so far over the course of your marketing career?
You need to write. Like to write is to think, and you learn how to clarify your ideas and your thoughts, and you learn how to communicate by writing. And then by you going through the process of clarifying, working through it, crunching it until you can communicate it clearly. And using something like ChatGPT to help clarify your thoughts, there's value to that. And I think doing it some so that you could even see how to do that is helpful, especially when you get stuck. But there's something to staring at a blank page until you get an idea, writing and getting a stream of consciousness, editing that down, clarifying it until you can take a page and turn it into a sentence. If you just outsource that, you're losing the value of learning how to think and how to process these ideas. So write.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Tales Show. Today, my guest is Joseph Lewin. Is it this how you pronounce it, Lewin?
Joseph Lewin. Yeah, close.
Lewin. Joseph Lewin, welcome to the Marketing Tales Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be possible without guests like you, so I really appreciate you being on the show. And this is a show about marketers and their journey and what they do to help their customers succeed in the marketplace. So you've been in marketing for about a decade now. What made you want to get into marketing, and what do you love about marketing?
You're making me feel old. Yeah, so I have kind of had a very untraditional journey to get into marketing. Not to rehash my whole career journey, nobody wants to hear that. But I used to be in more of construction type, a lot of manual labor work, and I swept chimneys for 5 years. So I was getting home black from head to toe. And so part of the reason I got into marketing was because I hated manual labor work and I needed to figure something else out, and kind of fell into marketing because my wife started an organization in Kenya, and we needed photos and videos for the project there, and we were living there for a little bit, and I'd always done photography and been interested in photography, and then when we were working on this project, I needed to get video too. So I talked with some local friends that did video, and they taught me a little bit, and I got some equipment and started doing video, and then little over little, I got a portfolio, started a business doing content for small businesses, and then just kind of transitioned over time into where I'm at now.
Good on you, man. I had a similar journey. I worked construction. My first job was pouring concrete for 4 years, man. It was brutal work. And I knew that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life because I saw the effects on the body that this kind of work has. So I made a transition as well. It took me a long time to get to this point, but here we are, marketers with a similar background in construction. So really appreciate you sharing that, and your determination to evolve and figuring something out that you wanted to do with your life. So you worked your way through the ranks, and now you're currently the director of growth at Proofpoint Marketing. Can you tell us a little bit more about Proofpoint Marketing and your role as director of growth?
Yeah, so at Proofpoint, we work with B2B professional services companies to typically end up being the best, but B2B companies that have technical services and they have long, complex sales, those are typically the types of companies that we work with. Usually they are companies that have been very sales heavy, and they've grown through referrals and through relationships, and they get to the point where they're ready to scale. And so they go, hey, we need to bring in marketing. And that tends to be the best kind of client for us, because we help them create marketing programs that build relationships at scale. So essentially help them do what they've always done, which is building great relationships. Only we help them do that online through their digital marketing content, and then tie together the marketing content to their sales team and help their sales team be part of creating the content and activate on LinkedIn typically, and bring those to bring deals to a close. And what I'm doing as director of growth is building out our sales and marketing for Proofpoint. So we're running a show that we're actually kicking off the week that we're recording this, called Relationship Led Growth Live. And we're talking about why relationships are really the foundation for B2B marketing and sales. And then, essentially my job is to meet people, build relationships that need what we do, and help them create marketing and sales strategies that grow their business.
Awesome. Yeah, it's all about relationships. It's a recurring theme here on this show. When I ask people about one of the most important things to consider as a marketer, it's networking and building relationships with other marketers and your potential customers. Is there a specific industry vertical that Proofpoint Marketing is focused on?
So we haven't really niched down on an industry vertical. A lot of the companies we work with, I would say the indicator across the board is, for one, they value relationships.
Okay.
And so they're typically companies that they really understand that, and they don't want to lose that as they scale. So the very transactional lead generation focused marketing doesn't really resonate with them, because they've always been relationally focused. But then the other piece of it is, it's usually when their people are their product, like they are consultants. It's not true across the board for all of our customers, but there's usually a very heavy consulting piece where, they need people on their team to have built rapport and be seen as a trusted advisor. So even if they're selling a physical product, they're usually selling that because the person who's selling it really knows their stuff, and people trust them to come in and give them advice and help them, almost more as a consultative sale.
Yeah, definitely the trust factor there, especially with the bigger ticket items. People just don't buy it off the shelf. There needs to be some sort of a relationship that's built there over time. In the past, you had your feet and dabbled with demand generation marketing as well. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that in this episode, because I hear a lot about demand generation lately, on LinkedIn and online. So demand generation marketing, right? It's a multi-step process that aims to nurture key customer relationships for the long term. So here we are again about relationship building. Can you share a little bit about the strategy for aligning the sales and the marketing teams, which some companies have those siloed in your organizations, and what challenges have you faced in this area, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so when it comes to demand generation, I think a lot of people have different opinions about what that actually means. But when we're running demand generation campaigns, it's typically content that is created from the brain of subject matter experts on the team of people that we work with. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of companies don't want to do it, is because it requires effort from their team. So I usually say, look, if you work with us, we're not going to save you time. We're just going to multiply the value that you're getting from the time you're spending. So we're not going to come in and be able to make up content that's going to resonate with your audience. Your team has to participate in creating that content. Like, your team needs to be on video. They need to be, they don't necessarily need to write, but they need to be the information needs to be coming in from their head. And so great demand generation content is, essentially mind melding the subject matter experts on the team of our clients, pulling that information out, whether that be through a podcast or webinars or, social media content, video, whatever the medium is. It's really getting information that nobody else is sharing about, putting that point of view online, so that people go, hey, I've never thought about it like that before. That's interesting. I'd like to talk to these guys. Or that's how I think, but nobody's talking about it like that. I need to talk to these guys. So it's essentially creating content that makes people go, hey, I want to work with you. And you asked the question about sales, but I can get into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to find that connection piece, right? Because different people, depending on their backgrounds, like our backgrounds in construction, you may have a different angle you approach it, right? And you look at a certain topic, any given topic, really, that somebody who has always worked in white collar may not see it that way. So, and that's also depending on what company you're targeting, right? Everybody has different people with different perspectives and different backgrounds. So having a diverse team with diverse insights is really valuable to hit as many points and as many target audiences as you possibly can. And you touched on like video, social media, written content. So let's talk about more about the strategy. So a comprehensive demand generation strategy also focuses on thought leadership, right? It's a big deal right here. And education, educating potential customers to aim of building a positive brand perception. You know, a lot of people, they go to industry conferences, they talk on stage. What strategies do you use at Proofpoint Marketing?
I mean, our main drivers are usually podcasts or live, live events, not in-person events. Not we're not opposed to that, and there's definitely value in in-person events, especially if you're speaking. There's a lot of value in doing that. But we find that podcasts and live, webinar type events are very scalable, and they help you build relationships because you're getting the value in an interview style podcast like this. You having me on, you're getting value in a couple ways. You're growing an audience, you're sharing my point of view with your audience, and so you're educating them. You get to share your point of view at different points in the show, and people get to know you. And then you're gaining credibility by me being on your show, and I'm gaining credibility by you asking me to be on the show. So it's a win-win all the way around. But then, maybe at some point there's somebody I know that would be a great fit for what you do.
Yep.
And then I make an introduction, or maybe you have somebody on your show that ends up becoming a customer of yours. So you're getting the direct relationship value, but you're also getting the demand gen side of it, where you're sharing that point of view and you're becoming seen as an industry influencer, somebody who, an influencer, we're not talking about like Kim Kardashian, it's being seen as somebody that people want to know and they want to talk to. And I was at an event last night, a LinkedIn local event, and I had people that wanted to talk to me, and they're coming up to me and they're like, "Hey, I saw you here last year. It was great." And they're picking my brain, and it, it's leading to a couple conversations from that, ongoing conversations with potential customers from doing that. So demand gen is, yeah. I think one other piece though that kind of ties it into more of the sales side of things, and where I feel like the hardcore demand gen people go wrong, is if a sales team is required, and unless you're selling like $99 products, you probably need somebody who's going to have sales conversations with people. If you're just passively waiting for people to talk to you, it's a huge miss. Because really, in demand gen, I think the best kind of demand gen is when you help people understand the problem that they're experiencing in a new way and show them that there's a different kind of solution than they've ever thought of. And so you're active through everything you're doing. You're moving them slowly, usually, sometimes quickly, mostly slowly, from, hey, this is the established way of doing it. If I'm going to solve this problem, whatever it would be, if I'm going to solve marketing problem, lead gen is the way to do it. Maybe somebody's thinking that. Well, when they come across my content over time, maybe I'm slowly moving them towards, hey, maybe there's a different way of doing it. Building relationships and having your marketing focus on relationships is more valuable. But then there's this piece where if you're waiting for them to come to you, they're going to miss really important parts of defining their problem that make it hard for you to actually close that sale. So then what we're focused on is, how do we create a middle ground kind of content that the sales team is creating that positions them as being somebody that their customers want to talk to as a trusted advisor. And it makes it really easy for the salesperson to reach out and have a conversation. So instead of waiting for them to come in and fill out a form and then, getting on a sales call, maybe as a salesperson, somebody attends an event of ours, they comment and they say, hey, this was really insightful. I can reach out to them and not trying to pitch them, but just saying, hey, thanks for coming to the event. I'd love to chat with you and talk marketing, and then we get on a call, chat about marketing. Some of those people won't be a good fit, but it's great to have a relationship with them. Maybe they will be down the road. And then some of those people are going to go, well, actually, this is what we're trying to do. Do you think what you guys would do is a good fit? So anyway, to kind of put a bow on that, the idea is you need something after your demand gen content that makes it easy for your sales team to engage people in conversations and relationship building. And if you don't do that, I think you're really missing out.
That is so true. It's all focused these days on bringing value to the customers, like we did with this podcast, or I'm currently running a webinar series for our company. And if I bring valuable insights to those in our industry, they're more willing to even open my email that they're getting from me, right? I mean, I'm getting pitched. I get like 10 pitch emails every day, and all I do is hit delete because I'm like, first of all, I don't know you. Second of all, I don't want to know if I don't know if I need your product because I don't have a relationship with you, I don't really have the time to read your email. So if Joseph sends me an email, I'm going to look at your email because we build a relationship through this podcast and before through our intro call and then on LinkedIn because I constantly see you. So you build trust with me. And when I see your name pop up in my inbox, I'm like, hey, this is Joseph, right? I'm friendly with Joseph. I really want to see what he has to say. And instead of somebody, John Doe out of the blue, I'm like, even if you give me a compliment, it means nothing to me because you don't know me and you didn't take the time to build that trust with me. So I'm moving on. But like I said, you're pretty active on LinkedIn. And that's how I got connected with you through my previous guest, Dan Sanchez, who introduced me to you. This is how you ended up on this show. This was the referral right there.
Yep.
But since you're pretty active on LinkedIn, do you feel that today's modern marketer should embrace the creator economy and start building a personal brand on LinkedIn or Twitter to build trust with potential clients?
100%. I think it's totally silly not to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand not everybody's extroverted, but honestly, I'm not really an extroverted person. Like if I go to group events, I like finding one person and talking with them. I don't feel comfortable in, big group settings unless I'm like, if I'm presenting or something, that's fine. But I don't know what to do with myself. I feel kind of awkward. So I'm not the like crazy extroverted person. But if you want to move forward in your career, you have to be doing something beyond just what people inside of your company can see. Mm-hmm. And it brings value to you as an individual. It brings value to your company. And I mean, I've gotten clients for companies that I've worked for from my podcasts, mm-hmm. and gotten discovery calls with people that for different companies that I've worked for totally by accident. And I found a lot of vendors and contractors and stuff that we work with through, and actually I have, there's 2 people on my team that originally ran across us for my personal brand. Mm. And I mean, finally, I have my current role because I was active on LinkedIn. I saw one of my bosses, Gabby, I was seeing her content consistently. And then her husband, Mike, I saw him starting to show up in my feed. And he commented on somebody's post and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So I invited him to come on my podcast. And so 2 personal branding things, the podcast and LinkedIn. And then he ended up saying, hey, I have this role that hasn't gone live yet, but I think you'd be a really good fit. And the rest is history. And I mean, it was a big pay increase for me, definitely huge growth opportunity. And it came from building a personal brand.
That's one of the things that I've been told as well, that you build those connections and you don't even have to worry about submitting an application anymore. The jobs come to you if you continue to build your network with the right people and like bring them on your show, like a podcast. And you've touched on your podcast, and I know that you are the host of the Strategic Marketer podcast. Is this still going on? And what are some of the benefits besides getting a job through it for marketers to starting a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. I've been a little bit behind on it, so I'm planning to kick it off again here shortly. Just the role I was in was getting to be super busy, but then in my new role, part of my job is developing my personal brand because it helps with all the things we talked about, as I'm talking with people who need what we do, way easier if they've commented on a post of mine, or I have them on my show, or, whatever the case would be. But benefits to, on a personal level, to doing a podcast, I mean, relationships really are everything. And that I didn't really understand that a couple of years ago, but pick any kind of marketing. So you do SEO. If you're going to be really successful at SEO, you need really good content. You need to be able to quote people who are experts. You need backlinks. Do you know how you get all that stuff? Having relationships and building rapport with people who are in a similar space. And so, if you're in demand gen, same thing. You need to find subject matter experts, both internally and being able to develop those relationships for your internal team, but also finding people externally who people respect, and having them on a show or a podcast or whatever. And how do you build those relationships? A podcast is the easiest way to do that, because instead of me reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'd love to grab a virtual coffee, and they've never seen me before, chances of that happening are basically zero. Whereas if you reach out cold and you say, hey, I just saw your post on LinkedIn about XYZ, or I heard you on this other podcast, or, I took your program, read your book, whatever the case would be, I'd love to have you on my show and talk about it. You'll get people who would never sit down and have a conversation with you for coffee that will come on your show. And then once they do, they're way more willing to have further conversation with you after that.
100%. I totally agree. And that's a good approach for me to get more guests. I should be more in the comments on LinkedIn and just get guests that way because you give the value to them. They get something great out of it. They get a show and some more exposure. Now let's talk about real quick about nurturing your leads, right? So once you had them on your podcast or they were at a webinar, what's your approach to get them through the customer journey? Do you have any tips or best practices you can share? Like after you follow up, like let's say you have a webinar and then you send them a copy of the recording. What's the next step?
Yeah, so I think to me, it's how do we add value to people? So instead of cold emailing somebody and then saying, hey, just bumping this back to the top of your feed, whatever. It's like, how do you build actual relationship in a way that's valuable? I mean, something we're really piloting with some customers that's been starting to work and that we're about to launch internally too, is something we call a conversation magnet. And it is a lead magnet, but just with a slight nuance to it that I think makes it much more valuable. So instead of it being an ebook or a guide or something like that, that's not there's not really a good reason to follow up other than to say, hey, what did you think? And it's like, first of all, they probably didn't actually consume it. And secondly, they, what are they supposed to say? Oh, it was good. It's like asking a yes or no question to somebody. You're just not going to get the same level of information. Whereas if you create your conversation magnet to be focused on something that your team has expertise in, that adds a ton of value to the person on the other side, and it's something that they would use in their daily work and makes their job easier. So that could be something like a calculator, and I'm not talking about an ROI calculator. I'm talking about something like, in the engineering space, there might be some technical thing that people need to calculate to figure out the load of whatever XYZ thing. And I'm not an engineer, so I want to make myself look any dumber by trying to talk like an engineer. But you could have a calculator that helps them do that automatically, and it could just be an Excel spreadsheet where they put the information in. It could be one thing that we're working on is a question set to help you with your sales team to get them to create content. So it's basically like a content guide that's based on questions you ask your sales team. They record a video and send it back. So it's something that they actually have to activate on. And the reason that's important is we have a webinar. The follow-up is we have this download for you. You could reach out, or we could have a link, whatever way you do that. Anybody that fills that out there's a really good reason for you to reach out to them. It's not, hey, pop into the top of your inbox, not what do you think? You're saying, hey, I'd love to take a look at that guide with you and give you some pointers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea because I was always thinking about what am I going to do with the webinar recording that I have. So last week I had a webinar and I email it to the prospects because I have their email list. So would you, I mean, I don't know if I should make it like gated content again because I already have their email address, right? So I don't want to send them would you send them the webinar recording and make them fill out a form again? Or how would you do that? How would you go about that? Or
I
would you
mean, it's
just,
not a, so the only reason I would have somebody fill out a form is if I'm trying, like, I'll say one more piece on this that clarifies it a little bit. It makes it easier if somebody raises their hand and you want whatever that document is to be something that, you know, it's everything I said, it's useful, something they actually activate on. But the final piece is it gives you a clue that they have a need for what you do. So, you know, if it's that they have a need for what you do. So the point is them filling out a form to download something like that. They're saying, I am actively trying to solve this problem that you solve.
Yeah.
Then when you reach out to them on a call, to say, hey, you know, I'd like to talk, whatever, would you need help with this? They get on with you, you talk through it, you give them some pointers. At the end of that call, how do you turn that into a sales conversation versus like a value add conversation? You just ask one simple question at the end. Would you like any more help with that? And if they say yes, it's a sales conversation now. If they say no, awesome. Well, I'd love to learn about how it goes. If you need any other help, feel free to ping me. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah.
Now you've built rapport, you've built relationship, you've added value, and you've set yourself up to be able to really easily have a sales conversation without hard pitching them, without, you know, getting crazy with it. And if they say yes, it needs to lead it, you know, you need to craft something that really easily leads into a sales conversation.
Exactly. And you never want to put the pressure on, you know, that's one way to get for them to just, you know, retreat and not want to go any further with you. Yeah. So let's talk about, say somebody's on the call here, just starting out in marketing. What's one important lesson that you have learned so far over the course of your marketing career that you could share with the audience?
Okay, so there's three things that I would say. One is going to be new, and then two, kind of rehashing something that we've already said, but I want to reemphasize it. The first thing is you need to write. And I think my biggest concern with ChatGPT is that it's not at a point where it's going to replace great writers, not even close. But it does replace entry-level writing basically instantly. So the problem with that is it de-incentivizes new marketers from learning how to write. And when you like to write is to think, and you learn how to clarify your ideas and your thoughts, and you learn how to communicate by writing. And then by you going through the process of clarifying, working through it, crunching it until you can communicate it clearly. And using something like ChatGPT to help clarify your thoughts, there's value to that. And I think doing it some so that you could even see how to do that is helpful, or especially when you get stuck. But there's something to staring at a blank page until you get an idea, writing and getting a stream of consciousness, editing that down, clarifying it until you can take a page and turn it into a sentence. If you just outsource that, you're losing the value of learning how to think and how to process these ideas. So write, have a daily practice of writing. It could be journaling, it could be writing a blog, it could be writing an email newsletter, whatever it is. You actually do the writing. You're going to suck at first. Maybe ChatGPT could do it better than you. But if you really pursue writing, you're going to grow. And then it leads into the other two things, which would be get active on LinkedIn. And so if you want to do daily writing, write a post for LinkedIn every single day. And if you don't know what to write about, ask a question about something that you want to know. And you're going to get other people who are going to get in and they're going to have an opinion about it and they're going to comment on your stuff. And if they don't, then send a link to it to people that you do care about their opinion and say, hey, I'm trying to get my stuff started on LinkedIn. I'd love your thoughts on this topic. And you're going to get people who are going to start engaging with it. You're going to build relationships through that. And the final thing is start a podcast. You don't have to be an expert to start a podcast. All you have to be able to do is ask people questions. You could start a podcast on something you have zero expertise in. You just have to get good at asking people the right kinds of questions. And as long as you ask good questions, the podcast will be interesting.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. I started this podcast at the beginning of the year, and it was solely out of necessity because I wanted to learn more about marketing. So I figured instead of having a coffee talk with somebody, let's have them on a podcast. But it wasn't even a podcast. It was more like a one-on-one conversation on Zoom. And I recorded it just so I could refer back to it. And then I had that content, and I thought to myself, well, I already have the content. I already write about my conversation with that person. Why not make it a podcast and then post about it on LinkedIn? And that's how my podcast came about, the Marketing Tales Show, which was never supposed to be a podcast. It was just a one-on-one conversation, which just, I didn't even call it a podcast at the beginning because I didn't want to label it as such. But then it just became that. And here we are at episode 22. Every week since the beginning of the year, I published one of those. So it's been a good ride so far, and look forward to making more connections.
Well, the biggest thing, and I won't go on it because I know we're kind of getting over time here, but the key is if you're new at marketing, don't think of a podcast as you being able to become influential and sharing your perspective. Look at it as a way, from what you just said is brilliant. You get a chance to reach out to people that are way smarter than you, who would not take the time to sit down and have a conversation with you one-on-one, but you'll get to ask them questions they probably wouldn't even answer in a one-on-one conversation on a podcast, because it makes them look smart. And the smarter you make them look, the more they'll appreciate you and want to help you in your career. And the easier it will be to get other guests in the future, because if you're really good at making people look good, other people are going to want to come on your show and you make them look good as well. And you're going to get way better job opportunities and just move forward in your career much, much faster by doing that.
Yes, that's such a good point, man, because I have a public relations degree, so that's kind of what I learned, to make people look good, companies look good. And some of my guests at the beginning of this Marketing Tales Show experience, they were classmates of mine, right? And they were like, I just got out of college. I'm not an expert. And I said, everybody has a story. Just tell your story. It's going to be fine. And then I write it up, and they were like, oh my gosh, man, you make me sound like I'm such an expert. And it's like, you are an expert in a particular topic. You have a particular point of view nobody else thinks about, and you have a story and how you got to that point where you are today. So in my opinion, you are an expert in your universe, in your sphere, and other people should know about it, because there may be somebody out there who can resonate with that. And I always say, don't write it for the masses to go viral. Write it for the one person who needs to hear it on that particular day. And if you affected somebody positively and changed somebody's life, then this half an hour talk was worthwhile. Going into one of my last questions here real quick, further education. So are there 2 books or podcasts you could recommend anybody should listen to if they want to rise in their marketing career?
It's a great question. I mean, a book, my top book recommendation just across the board is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It's about negotiating. But really, it's about understanding people and learning how to pull information out of people. And I mean, that could sound negative, but it's really just learning how to have good conversations and ask good questions and get people to open up. It's an amazing book. The tactics that he has in there are great. And it's written by a guy who's the former head hostage negotiator for the FBI. So his stories in there are super interesting, and it's full of terrorists and all kinds of bomb threats and stuff. So super entertaining book, but the strategies are on point. And I use those tools when I'm doing customer interviews, I'm doing stakeholder interviews. I use it for my podcast. I use it in sales conversations. I use it in conversations having hard conversations with people in my personal life. It's incredibly valuable book. Another book would be Writing Without Bullshit by Josh Bernhoff, I think is his name. It's a really, really great book. Final thing, podcast, I would say listen to the Dave Ramsey Show.
Yeah.
He's a financial guy, and whether you agree with him or not, he's an incredible marketer. Just how, if you listen to his show enough, you'll start to hear patterns of how he's using very consistent language. He tells the same stories over and over again, but does it extremely well and consistently. He has different frameworks that he talks about and uses. So if you listen to him long enough, you start understanding the program and how it works. He's really good at using emotion, getting people to feel emotional. He's great at storytelling. I mean, he's just one of the best marketers of all time. So if you listen to Dave Ramsey's show, you'll learn a lot about marketing without it being just like straightforward marketing talk.
He's good. I listen to him as well. And I listen to his counterpart, Ken Coleman, the Ken Coleman Show. I listen to it.
Oh, yeah.
I like his show. I have it on YouTube. I'm subscribed to it. So it always pops up. So I listen to him. Real quick, before we end the show, you earlier touched on it a little bit. Waweza Movement. Waweza. What's that? Can you tell me about
Waweza.
Waweza?
So my wife, when she was 19, was spending some time in Kenya. Her parents had done a bunch of clean water well projects and stuff like that there before. And she was 19, she was in Kenya and saw little kids that were the same age as her little sister that were living on the street. And she was like, man, somebody's got to do something about this. So she's awesome. And somebody who, when she feels like something needs to be done, she takes action on it. So she started nursing school and raised a bunch of money and built a rescue center there for kids. So since 2011, we've been running a rescue center where we have kids that have been in really vulnerable situations that come to live there for some of them full time, some of them for a period of time, and do job training. We've actually just gotten to the point where some of our older kids have transitioned into the workforce and have gotten job training and are now working and making a living for themselves, which is what we've been working towards for the last 12 years of running it. So it's really exciting to see some of these kids really start to go from being in total poverty, living on the street or close to it, to being able to make it on their own. It's really a lot of fun to be part of it.
That is a beautiful story, man. Bless you guys for that, for sure. As we end the episode, how can people get in touch with you, and how can they get involved with your movement if they want to help?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's definitely the best place. Feel free to reach out to me, ping me if you want to talk about marketing. And the Strategic Marketer podcast, you could check that out, look it up. And then as far as Waweza Movement, it's spelled Waweza. And the website is wawezamovement.org, and you can check that out.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Joseph. I really appreciate you being on the show today and sharing your insights with the audience.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, my friend.